The changes we can make to our QuickBooks forms by simply doing basic customizations move us kind of out of the predictable, out of the box look and feel to a really customized world. Another way to make basic customizations, but also a change that is much more functional in nature rather than just visual, is to change the fields of information that actually appear on our forms. We can do this by activating basic customizations, and then from the bottom center of the screen, click or tap the additional customizations option. Once this window displays, we can customize what information is actually displayed on our forms. It's important to make sure that we understand what's in the screen because there are a lot of different pieces and parts, if you will. The first is to make sure we look at the top left of the screen. There are different tabs for headers, columns, progressive columns if we're using progressive invoices, the footer, as well as printing. For each of these tabs, we're presented with available fields. We can choose whether we want to see those on the screen and or in printed hard copies of the particular form we're working with. For example, by default with this invoice, the purchase orders and the sales orders are not displayed. If we want to display them as we work with them on screen, we can simply check the box. If we ever see a message like this, it's okay for the moment, but it is something that we would need to fix. It's telling us that if we add more fields, it's going to overlap existing information, and that isn't going to look good, and it's not going to be readable. So it's something we would want to remedy. Unfortunately, we have to remedy that in a different area, so we're not going to discuss it now. We'll go ahead and say continue to get rid of the dialog, but then we'll move back and we'll turn off the purchase order number. It's a little annoying that QuickBooks isn't smart at this point, and it displays the same message over, so we again can just say continue. How we do business and what parts of our business we use will determine which of these fields we utilize. For example, if we don't utilize sales reps, maybe we are or I am the only part of the business, then we don't need to put a sales rep field. But for companies that do, this can be useful information, either again for us as we're working or on the printed hard copies. We can see a lot of information that's available, and any of it can be used in any combination. Don't forget that we may need to scroll down to see all of the fields. And this is important because for this particular invoice, we can see that even custom fields that we have created are available to be seen and printed. They will appear at the bottom of the list, and only the ones that we have customized will be actually shown. In this case, that includes things like the contract number, birthday, spouse's name, and region. So we recognize the fields, we know that we can check to view it on screen and or in the printed copy. But what about this last field? We can actually type stuff there. Well, remember that QuickBooks is actually a database. And we can't really do much to change the actual configuration of that database, but we can, using this feature, change how the titles display. For example, if in our business we don't refer to account numbers, but instead call them customer numbers or possibly a valued partner ID, then we would want that terminology to appear on our paperwork. It reflects our company style and the terminology that our customers or vendors will be used to hearing. We notice, for example, that near the bottom of the list, that the project and job field is actually labeled project. We may not call it a project. Instead, we may always refer to it as a job. So this is a simple fix. Along those lines, notice that a majority of these are typed in all uppercase letters. They appear on different places on our form, so we need to be careful that if we change the case, that it matches the other items that appear in that particular region or section of the form as well. Now that's the basics of how all of this works, but let's take a look at the Columns tab. If we receive any messages, we'll go ahead and click or tap Continue, and then activate the Columns tab itself. The columns is about the section of our invoice in this case where most of our sales data occurs. It's this big area right here. And it's important because this is kind of like a table or maybe even a mini spreadsheet that has to contain all of the relevant information for this particular invoice. If we are a construction company and are working on a job, then maybe the actual service date when we used lumber versus installed cabinets doesn't really matter. But in my business as a trainer, the date I provided training services absolutely matters. So once again, these are all columns of information that we can add or remove from the screen and from the print. But what's different about these columns as opposed to the ones on the header is that we can change the order in which they appear. Currently, the item displays first, followed by the description, and then the quantity. Maybe for our business, we want people to see the quantity first. So we'll change this number to 1. We may again get a lot of different messages, and we're just going to continue to click continue until we work through what we're trying to demonstrate. Notice that as soon as we changed our old quantity field to number 1, everything else automatically renumbered, so we don't have to go through them and manually renumber them ourselves. This is a good thing. When we activate the footer tab, it's going to be very similar to what we saw in the header. These are the things that appear at the bottom of our form. We can have our traditional customer messages, as well as important financial information like the actual subtotal, sales tax, and total. If your business works in an area that does not collect any sales tax ever, then maybe we want to customize this so the sales tax doesn't ever show up. That would be a perfect type of customization. It might also be why we choose to have more than one of each kind of paperwork or form. We could have an invoice for no sales tax and another invoice for customers that are charged sales tax. The one field that's a little bit different here is this one called long text. We can select to print that, and then on the right-hand side, we can enter the actual text. This is usually where companies make some type of legal disclaimer, either about privacy concerns and sharing of information, or about copyright, or any other variety of legal disclaimers that our attorneys think we need to be making on our paperwork. The last tab that we can take a look at, as far as our additional customizations go, is the Print tab. We can choose to either use the default invoice printer settings, or we can use specified printer settings for this particular invoice and template. If we choose to use specified settings, then we basically get to determine how we want this to print. For example, we could print our invoices in landscape format to be a little bit different, or perhaps to accommodate all of the information we want to show. We can also choose multiple numbers of copies, if in our business we always have to provide more than one copy, and we can even change the paper size. Don't forget to look at the bottom left of the screen where we can designate if we want to print page numbers on forms with more than 2 pages, and this last little checkbox about printing trailing zeros. Basically, this is just talking about adding zeros to quantities so that if we use decimal places with other values, everything lines up. If we choose to do that, then we will have the ability to also say how many decimal places we want. At this point, we can click OK and see the fruits of our labors on screen. We can also click Print Preview to see how the printed version is going to look now. While we did not invest a lot of time fully going through each and every option, we can definitely see the changes that we've made are very beneficial. The beautiful part is that we didn't have to know anything technical about design or about programming or about databases. All we had to do was make choices from options presented to us. Although basic and additional customization is kind of a generic word, and it seems like it's going to be very simple and probably not very useful, we can see that it is actually anything but basic.